This is breaking news.
Hours, we have kind of messaged that we thought that we were very close and that we thought that we would be announcing a resumption of service with some promptness. And I want to say that we regret that that has not happened. I want to describe and talk about that for a second, about why that didn't happen and what I think is the significance of it. So commencing last night and then into early this morning, because we bargained until about 1:30 this morning, we presented a number of, I'm going to call them variations on a theme, because as you might imagine, at this point in the negotiations, most of the positions have been pretty fairly articulated and described and explored. So we presented a couple of variations on a theme. The unions, and again, these are 5 specific organizations, the unions said that they needed more time and that they weren't prepared to respond. They weren't prepared to respond substantively this morning at 1:30. So they said, we want to adjourn until today, until Monday morning. So of course we said, we understood that they were feeling, pressured, and we didn't want that. We want to have a fair conversation. Okay? So this is where we all say, oh, this reminds me of the Ghostbusters. So the point that I was making on the TikTok was that we got to 1:30 in the morning. They wanted a little more time, and so we said that we understood. They said, what time should we come back in the morning? And so we said, let's meet early so that we can try to get service back, right? Because what's this all about at this point? What this is all about at this point is getting service back to serve the public, the Long Island Railroad customers. So we suggest to come back at 7:30 and let's shoot for a morning, completion of the negotiations, hoping for a TA sometime this morning. They did come at 7:30. We were here at 7:30. We had some, I would say, informal back and forth. But to be clear, no new proposals took place this morning. Everything that has been discussed is what we talked about last night. No new, topics introduced. At about 11, so from 7:30 to 11, right, not a lot of things were happening, and in my world, nothing that I could describe as movement. So you know that I've described in the past what movement looks like. Nothing that I could describe. Nothing that I could describe, as movement. At 11 o'clock, the mediator came in and said that the unions wanted until 1 to think about their position. So they asked for another break from this morning at 11 until 1. Okay. So at 1 o'clock, then, when we were intending to resume negotiations, the mediator called again and said that the union was requesting, I shouldn't say requesting, the union said they would not be available until 3 this afternoon. So that's about an hour from now. Whether they will be or not, I don't know. I really don't have any confidence in this at this point. So I guess the takeaway that I would say is our sense last night that we were moving, perhaps slowly, but moving, intentionally, with intention, towards a collective bargaining agreement that would restore service to the couple 100,000 Long Island customers and really the million New Yorkers that are inconvenienced by this strike, turned out to be, I wouldn't call it false hope, but overly optimistic. And where we are right now is, I think we continue to have optimism that we can get this done, but it's not at the same level. And I think that the unions have shown us that they have no sense of urgency of getting this resolved. Notwithstanding the fact that they have 3,500 members on the picket lines not getting paid. I don't speak for them. but the deep inconvenience to the Long Island Railroad customers and the secondary inconvenience to the rest of New Yorkers, there appears to be, I would say, a lack of direct attention being paid to these entities, these parties, where we live, what we do, with the level of concern that you would hope. So with that, that's my quick update for this afternoon. A couple of questions and then out of here.
Questions, Newt? Mr. Laverson, how would you characterize the tenor of the negotiations? Because last night, the union described it as cordial. Today, they said they were upbeat and optimistic, but it sounds like you're less.
Well, I think I said that we had been pretty optimistic until about 1:30 this morning, and then I felt as though we were in a pause, but that I was at least confident that when we resumed this morning, we would be making, headway progress towards a tentative agreement to bring the railroad back up to service. Look, it is 2 o'clock. That didn't happen. So I can't convey to you, Newt, that I feel that level of optimism. What I feel is it should be that level of optimism.
Andrew?
Okay?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Andrew.
Why, if they're back at 3 o'clock and everybody was optimistic, why sort of pour vinegar on it right now? Why not still be open to the idea?
Are you speaking to me right now?
Yeah. What are they not? Is it not possible that what they're doing is chewing over what you offered, whether it was last night or over the last few days? Why is their request for a little more time necessarily so negative?
Okay, so Andrew, let me say it this way, right? If everything is down to a few moving pieces, right? I call them dials, but a few moving pieces, and we have an explicit conversation about those moving pieces last evening, and they say we want to think about it a little bit, so we're going to keep going. And then at 1:30 in the morning when they want to stop, and I say, based on my experience, when we get this close, you just keep going, right? You keep going. Why? Because you have to have a sense of urgency, because you have to be appreciative of the impact. I mean, okay, I don't want to describe the strike. You have to have a sense of urgency about what the implications of the work stoppage are. Then, okay, then we conceded to allow, an overnight, 7:30 this morning. No new topics, right? No new topics. So then 7:30 to 11, nothing, right? I mean, we're sitting in there, 7:30 to 11, nothing. 11, let's break until 1, right? Just before 1, let's continue the break until 3. So if you think that I'm pouring vinegar on what looks like a productive, kindling, no. Okay.
Gary, can I just add something,
Yeah, sure.
Andrew? In a negotiation, time matters, particularly if you're trying to reach a deal and get the railroad back up and running. It's not like you pull a switch and it gets back up and running. So there is an urgency to it that Gary's talking about. You want to get something done. If you can get something done earlier in the day, that's better news for the next day, and looking forward. So it does matter.
So would you say
the issues continue to be the issues that have been present up until this point?
Well, I think we said a few days ago that we had gotten to the place where they really had gotten down to money, right? It was a pretty simple description of a bid and an ask, and you could describe with great specificity, precision, indeed the amount. And I actually did a statement for all of you where I described the amount of money to the dollar, right? So I think the issue about how much money is in play has long been resolved. I think the issue is how, and that has been difficult. But there's a limit to how much difficulty there is at that level of specificity.
All right,
Lump
time for a
sum
couple.
payments still on the table?
I'm not going to describe what's on the table or off the table.
All right, come along, Kevin, go ahead.
Well, my question pertained to that because the unions did say that there were some new demands that were put on the table. Can you tell us what those were? And
Yeah, none. That's a falsehood. That didn't happen. No new demands went on the table this morning or at 1:20 in the morning. We were talking about that, and then exactly the same. The only thing that happened was I actually tried to describe to them on a piece of paper as opposed to verbally and articulate across the table, so there could be no misunderstanding about what the alternatives were. But there were no new demands put on the table.
Well, last night were there?
No.
All right, James.
Look, I know you're not a fortune teller, and I know you don't speak for the union, but if we had how you could just say how positive you are that we might see an agreement with you before today is over, how would you assess that?
Well, I assess it. I can only assess it from the vantage point of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and the Long Island Railroad, which is all effort is being paid to reach a conclusion to these negotiations. There is no effort that isn't being expended to close the deal. None. So I hope that tells you what we were talking about before, which is every effort trying really hard to move whatever dials are possible to get to the end.
All right, time for two more of these. Got to get back. Go ahead, Sam.
Did the union make any concessions in this negotiation, and is the offer still close to 4.5%, and the new hires make a smaller, an increased contribution to the health care?
Right. So it's not going to shock you at all. I'm not going to discuss their proposals, how changes they've made to their proposals, our proposals, what changes we've made to our proposals. The give and take in the negotiation should not be conducted here.
All right, Matt, go ahead. Last one.
Sorry, can I just ask you a question? How much are you asking unions to contribute for new hires? I know it's about 2%, more than 2%. But what is that percentage?
Well, the short answer to your question is all employees at the Long Island Railroad currently contribute 2% of their base wages, 40-hour wages, towards the provision of their health care. And they participate in the same plan as a couple 100,000 New York State workers, right? And we ask that new employees contribute more. I don't think new employees contribute more. Like I said, new employees would contribute more.
All right,
All right?
thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Got to get back upstairs. Thank you.
Matt, it was Friday, that was the offer.
Let me tell everybody. Hey, folks, the names were Gary DeLabris.
This has been breaking news.